My name is Greg Reed. I'm the lead interpretive ranger and volunteer coordinator here at Craters of the Moon. It's been wonderful. I love the resource. I love the surrounding region. I love a lot of the resources here.
As a visitor who has never came here before,
Mhm.
what can I expect if I come to visit Craters of the Moon?
Well, you can expect to see a lot of black rock, which might not be that interesting at first, but certainly what folks are looking at is basalt, and basalt is lava, and we've got a very significant region here of lava flows over the last 15,000 years, and so as visitors come to Craters of the Moon and they drive the park road and speak to the interpretive rangers, maybe attend a ranger program if it's the summertime, or read the interpretive signs at the stops. They're going to learn more and more about volcanism and why there is volcanic activity here in the middle of the continent. And the more that folks learn about that, it's, Craters of the Moon, in addition to lots of volcanic landscapes, I think are places where visitors can come and they kind of get a window into the inner workings of the earth. And this is a place where folks can learn how dynamic and living the earth's surface is, and how volcanism really drives just about everything else here on the surface of the planet. So, what visitors can learn here at Craters of the Moon by, observing the recent volcanism we've had here is really, how dynamic the Earth really is.
Do I have the opportunity to camp? Is there a camping area?
Oh, definitely. You can camp right in the lava flow. We have one campground here at Craters of the Moon, and we call it the Lava Flow Campground. You can camp right in a lava flow amongst um, uh, the the basalt flows, and so yeah, we've got a great campground. It's first come first serve. So that's open, yeah, all through the summertime. So you can come, you can camp. We have evening programs. We have night sky.
So if I'm looking through a list of places to travel to, and Craters of the Moon is a pretty unique name, why is it called Craters of the Moon?
That's a great question, and it's a question that a lot of visitors ask us here at the front desk. And the reason is because early on, in the history of this national monument, we were established in 1924. Early visitors felt that Craters of the Moon looked very much like we might expect the surface of the moon to look. Craters of the Moon is made out of basalt. The moon is made out of basalt. There's craters from volcanic eruptions here on the landscape. There's craters on the moon for a very different reason. Those are impact craters on the moon. But we felt that this place, not only does it have an otherworldly feel, but we also felt that the surface of the moon might look a lot like what we see here at Craters of the Moon. So that's kind of how it got its name. An early explorer, Robert Limbert, crossed the monument early 1900s and wrote an article that appeared in National Geographic in 1924 entitled "Amongst the Craters of the Moon," and that's kind of how our name sort of stuck.
That eventually led to having connections with NASA.
Well, absolutely, that's correct. Because of the fact that we felt that the surface of the moon may look similar to what we see here at Craters of the Moon, NASA felt that it was a great place for astronauts to come and to study geology. This was relative to the Apollo moon landings, and at that time, astronauts were not scientists. They were fighter pilots, they were test pilots, they were guys that had the right stuff. They were not scientists. And but a big part of the mission of going to the moon was to try to learn the moon's origin. And to do that, geologists, or astronauts rather, had to bring back samples of moon rock that would be of interest to scientists, to geologists here on Earth. So they had to have a crash course in studying geology. So NASA brought astronauts here during the Apollo missions. Not all of the astronauts were here, but some were here, and they were force-fed geology, which they understood the relevance and the importance to the mission. And it's because of the rocks that we brought back from the moon that we now have a working theory of how the moon formed.
What's so special about the skies at night at Craters of the Moon?
Well, what's so special about the skies here at Craters of the Moon is that we are a remote location, as many Western national parks are, especially out in the desert. And, we don't have a lot of towns or major cities near Craters of the Moon. And so that means that we have very little light pollution here. And so this is one of the best places in the country to see the Milky Way, especially on a clear, cool evening when we have a new moon. We were established as an international dark sky park, and recognizing our exceptional night skies here. And so that's another connection to space here at Craters of the Moon is that we have just epic night skies, and that probably generates as much interest as the volcanism here at Craters of the Moon amongst our visitors. Is folks are fascinated by seeing the night sky, and we always have been. It touches something that's kind of primal within us, our connection to night skies, and when we recognize that a lot of the country, especially folks east of the Mississippi River, 2/3 of the country right now cannot see the Milky Way. And so we're seeing the first generation of kids growing up without the ability to see the night sky. And that's really significant when we look at the role that the stars and night skies has played in our history. And so here at Craters of the Moon and other places that are remote out west, there's other units of the National Park Service that are designated as night sky parks. So this is one of the better places in the country to see the night sky. So we have a lot of astro programs and night sky viewing that goes on here at Craters of the Moon all summer long.
Why isn't Craters of the Moon a national park?
Well, that's another great question that a lot of people have asked us. Right now, Craters of the Moon is a national monument. It's a unit of the National Park Service. It's fully protected. When Craters of the Moon expanded to preserve all of the lava flows here along the Great Rift, that's the main geological feature here at Craters of the Moon that's causing all of these lava flows. So we expanded the monument back in the Clinton administration to preserve all of the Great Rift and the lava flows. And at that time, the decision was made to co-manage this landscape with the BLM. The BLM portions of the monument are preserved or maintained as a national preserve, and that means that this is also an area where we have multiple use. In the BLM portions of the national monument, there's off-road vehicles are permitted. Hunting is permitted. We're just now getting into hunting season. And so that's a really good trade-off here in Idaho. We tend to like this model of preserving public lands, but keeping them open to multiple uses, which coincides with the lifestyle of people here in Idaho, which are very much, outdoors people. There's a lot of, hunting and fishing. And so it really gives people access to their lands and their resources while also protecting the features as a national park. So kind of a trade-off there, and I don't know that there'd be a lot of local support for the establishment of a national park.
Say this place was upgraded to a national park. The process of taking care of the resource wouldn't change much, but it probably would bring in a lot more visitors. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Whenever a place achieves national park status, visitors are going to come, and we're already kind of right there. Our visitation grows every year. We are a unit of the National Park Service. We're a national monument. So, I'm a national park ranger. I've always worked in national parks. This is no different. And so, I think those lines for the visiting public are kind of blurred. Certainly, I think locals here in Idaho, understand the idea of the preserve. So I don't know if it would result in a lot more visitation. I definitely do think that considering that visitation is going up across the board in all national parks, certainly it wouldn't detract from our visitation.
Right. I see that we have solar panels. We used to have a nice green lawn out here. What are some of the steps that we've taken to kind of conserve and preserve kind of the natural state and not be too involved in, electricity and lawn care and water use?
Sure, that's a great question, and it just goes back to the fundamental nature of the National Park Service. National parks are places that preserve resources unimpaired for the benefit and enjoyment of future generations. That's the mission of the National Park Service, and that's what we try to do is preserve our resources unimpaired, unchanged, so that future generations can see them the way they are today. And so that means that not only do we protect and preserve a landscape, and not only do we educate people about that landscape, but we are also called to be caretakers of these places. And as such, it falls on us to take responsible steps to be responsible caretakers of these lands. And so that means, reducing our carbon footprint in any way that we can, is falls in line with the mission of preserving and protecting these places unimpaired. So national parks across the board, Craters of the Moon included, are taking steps that they can, to introduce vehicles that are hybrids that run on gas and electricity. So we're seeing more and more hybrid vehicles in our fleet of vehicles in the National Park Service. A lot of national parks have active recycling programs. Here we have solar panels that we have set up that we generate some of our electricity from solar energy. And so more and more we're going to see this sort of thing in national parks. It's already been happening quietly for the last couple of decades in national parks, and if anything, we're really becoming leaders in public land stewardship. And so that means responsible action when it comes to energy use.
And that's amazing that we're not only trying to spread the word of this, but we're leading by example as well.
You've got to walk the walk.
You had one last chance to go see one spot in Craters of the Moon, and you never got to come back. What's your favorite spot in Craters of the Moon? What would be the last thing that you wanted to see here?
I would probably run to the top of Inferno Cone. That is a one of our many cinder cone volcanoes here. There's many. They're hills. They're all small volcanoes. We have a line of small volcanoes all along this geologic feature, again, that we call the Great Rift. And Inferno Cone is one of the hikes that a lot of visitors do while they're here. It just takes 10 minutes to walk to the top of it. It's a 200-foot elevation gain, and it's one of the best views in the park. You literally can summit a volcano in 10 minutes here at Craters of the Moon. And on top, you're looking out across the vast Snake River Plain. You can see for 40 miles to the east and west. It's a spectacular view. So I think on a moonless night, heading up Inferno Cone, seeing a sunset, and then the Milky Way above my head would be hard to top an experience like that.
It doesn't look like there would be any bats out in this black rock. Does Craters of the Moon have any bats?
We definitely have bats. Because Craters of the Moon is a vast area of lava flows, lava fields here, caves, lava, we call them lava tubes. They naturally form during lava flows. As the surface of the lava starts to cool, a roof forms and a tube ends up forming. We call that a lava tube or a lava cave, and it's a great place for bats to be. Here at Craters of the Moon, we've got a great bat population. We've got 11 different species here at Craters of the Moon. So a pretty good, robust population. Sundown in the summertime, we see several species of bats just flying right overhead, feeding on mosquitoes. So we certainly love bats for their role in doing that. So yeah, because we have hundreds of acres of lava flow out there. There's literally caves throughout the entire monument, and lots of places for bats to spend the daylight hours or to hibernate during the wintertime. So yeah, lava equals caves, caves equal good bat habitat.
What is white nose syndrome?
White nose syndrome is a fungal disease. It is not native to this continent. White nose syndrome first made an appearance here in the United States about a decade ago, and it was found in the East Coast in some caves where some colonies of dead bats were found. And in the 10 years that white nose syndrome has been here, it has spread across the country from coast to coast and just showed up in Northern California outside of Lassen Volcanic Park earlier this summer. So it's an exotic fungal disease. Not sure how it got here. Because it has spread across the country from coast to coast. Bats don't migrate from coast to coast. It's felt that people visiting parks and caves, we may unaware to ourselves be carrying spores of this fungal disease on our boots, our shoelaces, our clothing, things of that nature. And so it's a fungal disease that it grows on literally grows on bats when they're hibernating. It's literally a white fungus that grows on their faces, their noses, their ears, their wings. And when it gets in a colony of bats, it's 90% fatal. And we approximate about 9 million bats have died in this country in the 10 years that white nose syndrome has been here.
So humans are not necessarily the only, but one of the biggest contributors to the spread of this disease through our clothes.
We think so. This when white nose syndrome shows up in the eastern United States and within 10 years it's on the West Coast, that's not bat migration. That is not animal migration. That's people.
Say I go into a cave that has this white nose syndrome and I have a shirt, but I put it in the washer, I wash it, I put it in the dryer, it's nice and clean. Would I be allowed to wear that shirt into the caves here at Craters of the Moon?
You would not. We have a permit system to enter the caves here at Craters of the Moon. When it's a free permit system, visitors, when they arrive, they'll come to the front desk of the visitor center and they'll let us know they want to enter a cave, and we'll ask if they're wearing anything that they wore in any other cave in the last 10 years. That's how long white nose syndrome has been here. And if they are wearing items that they've worn in any other cave, then we would ask them, to change if they have a change of clothes. If not, we wouldn't be able to issue them a cave permit. So it's really important for visitors to, before they come, to make sure that they are wearing, shoes, boots, clothing, backpacks, hats, everything that they're going to carry on their visit here at Craters of the Moon. It's really important for visitors to make sure that they are able to bring in, all of these items that have not been in any other cave in the last 10 years. So, the spores of this fungal disease are fairly indestructible. We don't really believe they wash out of clothing. A lot of people ask us about, washing the shirt, that sort of thing. And spores are really designed to be indestructible, to be transported via air or on the fur of animals. It's how funguses, are able to spread themselves, and they are designed to withstand, time and extreme temperature differences. So yeah, washing the shirt, probably not going to do it. So yeah, we just have to be really careful because white nose syndrome is not in our bat population here at Craters of the Moon. So we want to be really careful to do our best to screen out the possibility of white nose syndrome entering our bat population, and that's how we do it.
I've seen some cartoons and movies. They have a relation to vampires. They're kind of scary when they're flying in the air. So is it really that bad if white nose syndrome wipes out the whole bat population?
Well, it would be bad, and yeah, that's a lot of folks have a bias against bats. We're told that bats carry a higher rate of rabies than other mammals. That's not true. So yeah, bats I think are kind of misunderstood. Kind of Like some species, bats, snakes, spiders, wolves, a lot of species have negative biases attached to them for not really valid reasons. And it's the same with bats. Bats are not, harmful to humans. Certainly I've never had a bat fly down and bite my neck, so that's just not something that happens. Bats are, out there at sundown and sunup eating mosquitoes. We love them for that reason. But they are important parts of the ecology. All species have a role to play in ecosystems. And with bats, bats are night pollinators, like other insects, moths, for example. And bats eat a lot of mosquitoes again. So, bats are good. We like them, and they serve a role here, even though they are misunderstood.
If it's devastating to the ecosystem, and I'm just concerned about, say, my finances and the economy, does the depletion of bats have any relation to the economy?
Well, absolutely, because there's that concept of ecological services that parts of ecosystems, be them trees or rivers, etc., serve ecological functions that benefit humans. In the case of bats, bats, because they eat a lot of mosquitoes in the evening time, that means that they also eat a lot of agricultural pests. And if we didn't have bats providing this service, we would be, agriculturalists would be spending a lot more to spray their crops with pesticides, to make up for the presence of more ecological pests, things of that nature. So, theoretically, our food would be less clean if it had more pesticides, and it would probably be more expensive. So it would drive prices up because we would have to then through artificial means, we would have to make up that missing ecological service, and then the price always gets passed along to consumers. So, in an indirect way, yeah, everyone is affected.
And so less bats equals more mosquitoes, more chemicals, and less money.
Correct. Yeah, you could certainly make that connection.
So they seem like a pretty important part to this whole thing that we call life.
Everything has a role.
So craters of the moon, did all of this lava come from one big volcano that just kind of exploded and just shot lava everywhere, or how did this place form?
That's a feature, that I've been referring to as the Great Rift. And here at Craters of the Moon, we don't have any one single volcano. Volcanoes, when people think of volcanoes, we think of Mount St. Helens. We think of a mountain that erupts with ash and magma. And that's pretty much, what folks think of when they think of a volcano. And those are called stratovolcanoes. Stratovolcanoes always occur at the edges of continental and oceanic plates. We don't have any plate boundaries here in the middle of the North American plate here in Idaho. So what's going on here is that geologic features, volcanism in the middle of the country, very, very different from the volcanoes that most people think of as being volcanoes. Again, the stratovolcanoes of the Northwest, your Mount Rainier, your Mount St. Helens, etc. In the middle of the country, very, very different types of volcanism. There is a giant hotspot very close by to us. We know it as Yellowstone. It's a magma plume or a supervolcano. There's about 30 of those in the world. Craters of the Moon is a different kind of volcano from Yellowstone and from the Northwest. It's called a rift volcanic system. And what's going on here at Craters of the Moon is that there's heat and pressure and forces from the mantle that are affecting North America from underneath. And this heat and pressure is causing North America, the western half of North America, to kind of expand, to stretch, to elongate. We call that basin and range topography, and that accounts for a lot of the topography in the West, where you have north to south running mountain ranges with valleys in between. That's basin and range topography. Here in the Snake River Plain, because the crust is a little bit thinner, and we don't have mountains right here in the Snake River Plain where Craters of the Moon is located. So what's going on is this extension of the continent is forming localized rifting. Rifting is literally a tear in the ground. It's a series of cracks and fissures. It's about 50 miles long from to south across the Snake River Plain. Craters of the Moon preserves the entire Great Rift in its entirety. It's a significant geologic feature. We consider it to be the deepest rift volcanic system in the world. We really are not sure how far down some of the rifting goes.
Wow.
But this rifting is kind of ongoing geology. It really started about 15,000 years ago, coming out of the last ice age, as the landscape cracks and rifts here at Craters of the Moon. Layers of magma deep below the surface are depressurized. They expand, they reach the surface, and we have a lava flow. So we've had 8 major lava flows in the last 15,000 years. And these volcanic eruptions, these lava flows, have occurred all along the length of the Great Rift, this 50-mile line series of cracks and fissures. And so rather than being, one volcano that we would know and think of, again, Mount St. Helens is the classic example. This is a very different type of volcanism where this rifting depressurizes lava, and all along that series we've had in the last 15,000 years lava flows and the formation of cinder cones, etc.
When was the most recent eruption?
2,000 years ago.
And from what I understand, these eruptions happen just about every 2,000 years, and it's been about 2,000 years. Do we have any guesses or estimates on if there will be another eruption soon?
We don't, but we certainly expect there to be an eruption in the future here at Craters of the Moon. This is ongoing geology. And when we look at the timing of volcanoes, we can estimate how many eruptions we've had in 15,000 years. 8 eruptions. And so then we can just come up with an estimate that, approximately every 2,000 years we have a lava flow. And it really doesn't work that cleanly. Volcanoes don't erupt like clockwork. That's an estimate. You could have an extra 1,000 years in between eruptions. So we expect there to be lava flows here in the future. We really don't know when those would be. This is an active volcanic system, and all active volcanoes like Yellowstone, Mount Rainier, etc. They're all monitored by the U.S. Geological Survey, and there's a certain pattern to seismic activity. It's called an earthquake swarm, and it indicates that magma is moving up in the magma chamber of a volcano. As magma moves up underneath of a volcano, it breaks layers of rock above this magma moving up, and so that breaks those rock layers, and it gives us that signature earthquake swarm that geologists are looking for. And so that is the number one indicator for any active volcano that an eruption is imminent. Back in 1980, when Mount St. Helens erupted, we had a couple of weeks where we were confident this volcano an eruption is imminent. Here in 2019, our technology is so much better for monitoring volcanic activity that we would absolutely know if a volcanic eruption was imminent. We could have days or weeks or even longer indicating that an eruption is imminent. So it wouldn't catch us by surprise here.
And that would probably bring in a couple more visitors if we had active lava out here in our lava fields.
I think so. I would certainly come here and
Yes.
see flowing lava across the landscape. It would be very similar to the lava flows that we see in Hawaii, where folks can still, at a safe distance, view flowing lava in Hawaii, and theoretically, it would be similar to that here. So I think maybe some people would want to stay away from a volcanic eruption. I think other people would flock here. So I think absolutely our visitation would go up if we had flowing lava here.
From our sponsors, Parks Project, they sent in some hats that we could give away to our guests just to show our gratitude for you coming on and sharing all your knowledge.
That's very nice. Thank you.
I do hope that you love parks. I assume you do. And so whenever you wear that, people will know exactly how you feel about national parks.
Well, thank you so much. This is a great hat. It's green. It says, "I love parks." And, given the fact that I've been a park ranger for 20 years now, I absolutely love parks. And so thank you very much for that. I will absolutely wear that with pride.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for being on here. We really appreciate it.
It's been great talking to you.